So thank you. Welcome to the May 3rd Council Budget Workshop. This is the first in a series of budget workshops we'll have over the next several weeks, a couple months. For the record, all councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Kenny. Councilor Robertson is joining us via Zoom. Before we begin tonight, just a couple sort of management logistic things. We're going to talk about every part of the general government section of the budget this evening. We can stop and take questions at any time. There's no protocol for waiting to ask questions or anything like that. But I would ask that councilors remember the ground rules that are at the end of our policy manual, which basically say, let everyone participate, listen with an open mind, choose words carefully, and try not to talk over each other. And for me, that's really important because I missed a comment that Councilor Berthelso was trying to make last week when she was remote. And I don't want to minimize anybody's voice. I want everybody to be heard. I want everybody to ask questions. And it would be really helpful for me just in terms of managing the meeting if we're all willing to keep those things in mind. The other thing that, good evening. The other thing I'd mention is that while we can do as deep a dive into the budget if we need to, one of our decisions is to stay on point, stay on time. We're shooting for 2 hours tonight. If we go long, we'll go long and we'll figure out how to adjust those things as we go forward. And also our job as councilors is to engage in policy discussions and set priorities for town staff and to give staff the opportunity then to respond to our concern. So I think if we approach the budget in that way, it will be a more productive meeting and we could always revisit questions and topics as we go along in our subsequent workshops. So that's my logistic introduction. I think we're going to begin tonight. Sophie, did you have a document you were going to share with us? And then we'll dive right into the budget.
So at our last meeting, you asked for staff to identify areas of cuts. So I thought about this quite a bit, and I don't know, if I share it, are you all going to start reading it? Okay. So I thought about this quite a bit because in the past we've done tier 1, tier 2. Tier 1 is to get to a smaller amount. Tier 2 is more drastic. Instead of doing that, I am offering up a variety of areas that I think council might want to talk about. I get frustrated when I do the tiers because that's staff telling you what service level should be cut. And what ends up happening is council has discussion, decisions get made, and when people aren't happy, it all lands on staff because we have suggested. So instead, what I've done is I have created a list of places that staff think we could reasonably reduce. The directions that were given to staff were wanting to not adjust wage scale, that not to fall back to the habit maybe of not giving people competitive wages. So we wanted to keep that plan in place. And also to, if they are suggesting a change in the capital plan, that needs to be a change. And as opposed to let's not buy it this year and let's just add that to the list of things that need to get purchased next year. Because one of the things I've noticed as we've gone back, if you look back in time, every year we come with a budget and council wants to shave and cut, which is your job. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of that. But when we do that, it means the next year when we ask for the thing that needs to happen, it's a big jump. And so I wanted them to articulate very clearly, if we're not going to buy the truck, what does that mean? And if it because we have already done the exercise internally of, if we're gonna maintain this level of service, here's what we need to buy over the next 15 years. If we're gonna adjust that, it's gonna cause the whole system to need to be recalculated. So you will see some capital shifts in here, but we've tried to articulate. I'm giving you paper copy because you like paper, but we're also going to put this, we are going to put this in the council packet budget folder on the council drive, because you will see when we talk about capital infrastructure, there are links to a 15-year plan and to what a reduction in infrastructure spending would mean long-term. So there are, but for your enjoyment.
So just to clarify, don't read this now. We're gonna do what we're doing, and that's for future.
Well, some.
Can't multitask for the
Yeah.
record.
So when we go through tonight, there are some things in general government that I can highlight for you when we start.
Sophie, I don't
Yeah.
mean to interrupt. Do you have an electronic version of what you're passing out? Has it been added to the drive?
Belle is doing that right. Are you gonna want?
Can she send me, can you ask her to send, or Belle, can you send me an electronic version? That would be awesome. Just a picture if you can just take a picture.
Do you want me to share it in the drive, Sophie, the spreadsheet, so they have the dynamic as things change, or do you want me to print a PDF and put the PDF?
I personally don't care which, as long as it is not this version, so that if people play with it, I don't end up with a modified version. That makes sense?
Yes.
You could also just make it a protected document so that we don't have editing access.
Yes. But also we have staff who have access to this, so we want to make sure that we know what the council is getting. So I'll make a copy and we'll put that up.
Sophie, is there a notation here to tell us with a certain suggestion, which part of the budget? Oh yeah, your budget line's impacted. Okay, perfect.
There
Thank
are
you.
some that say multiple.
Yeah.
And in that case, if you read the impact, you'll see it says take this whole budget sector out. So if you go and you look in fire department as an example, there's a whole emergency management budget. You would take that whole budget out. So.
Okay.
So. Just because I gave you something that's not prioritized, if it's not what you're looking for, you can tell me that, but I feel kind of strongly that staff doesn't determine what the service level is. That's really a council job. So that's one document. I still owe you two wage personnel ones. I'm gonna need till the 11th. We've got, my numbers are not adding up and I'd rather give you the right thing. That is what I have for that stuff.
All right. So we're,
Cheryl, you now have a link in your emails. Or as soon as your email updates, you'll have a link.
so in previous years, staff has given council a big presentation, and we sort of agreed that wasn't how we're going to approach this year. We're going to go through each budget section without an introduction, really, but with our staff experts here, so that we can sort of drive that conversation and kind of see what we have questions on in each section, ask for clarification, things like that. I think we'll do that just in the order that they appear in the book, unless somebody has a particular need or desire to do them out of order. But our first section in general government is on town council. So we'll start right on page 1 and we'll just get going. We can see changes over, this is reported as changes over time, and then changes to the current budget. open the floor to anybody that who has questions in the first section, which is general government / town council.
I guess I would say with $1,306 increase, 2%. I don't have anything put on this section.
So I had one quick question. I noticed professional services, the audit is listed here under council. I know we appoint like the auditor, but we also appoint the town attorney. Where's that listed?
Town attorney is listed primarily in town manager professional services.
But it's not broken out. It's just lumped into professional services.
It is the bulk of that.
Okay, so when we look at town manager professional services, we should assume that almost all of that is the legal fees.
75%.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was too easy to sustain. So let's move on.
I can ask another one if you really want, Jeff. Give me a minute.
Good. Okay, our second section is general government / town manager. And increase.
Where do you see the 8%?
Okay, the town manager subtotals.
On bottom of page
So,
9.
bottom of page 9.
Thank you.
So if I would just ask for clarification, the one line in this section that we see the biggest jump is in community connector costs.
So the town of Orono contracts with the city of Bangor for regional, we contract for 2 bus services and they are separate. One is the regional community connector, which we pay for out of the general fund, is allocated the town manager's budget line. And that is for that connector. We have a seat on the subcommittee that provides advice. It's an advisory committee to the city of Bangor. So we can give input. Each year, the city of Bangor creates its own budget for the community connector. That is an operating and capital budget. That budget then gets filtered through a formula based on ridership.
Hours and miles.
And I think we're at like 7% of the total budget. And it's an assessment. So if we want the service, that's what we pay for it. This particular budget line does not include any change to the service level that Orono residents would see. So there have been calls for later hours and different days. The city at this point is having a difficult time staffing its current hours and its current days.
They are expecting that Saturday service will return. It's been, there has been no Saturday service for several months now because they didn't have drivers to do that. And they started a program where they're actually training drivers in-house. They hire them and then put them through the training with in-house trainers. Some go to their public works department, some go to the community connector. And they're expecting, based on who has already passed their permit test, that they'll have Saturday service back. But they have budgeted for Saturday service before, so it's the same service level. It's just not feasible.
So this
And this is not Black Bear Express.
No, Black Bear Express is funded. That is not just advisory. The town, a resident, I believe, and the University of Maine make up the body that oversees the scope of service for the Black Bear Express. We get a bill, the university and the town split that. The Avenue contributes about $7,000.
I think 9 and the Orchard Trails contribute to a little bit under 7, yeah.
That is funded out of the downtown and transit oriented TIP district.
So back on this one, the regional community connector, if there's no change to service like hours or days, what is Bangor's explanation? I know we have no say, but I'm just curious, what is their explanation for why that's going up 27%?
So, they're negotiating the contract. Their contract expires at the end of June, so for this fiscal year, they'll have a new contract. They have been, struggling mightily to attract, quality employees that stay because their labor rates were real low. So primarily personnel costs. They brought on the new transit center in Pickering Square. So there's additional costs associated with staffing that and running. There's additional, the city of Bangor does a great job at going out to get grants, like the transit center was primarily funded by grants, but there's always a match to that. There's additional grant projects that are proposed, including their, what they call cold storage, the barn. So it's kind of it's primarily labor, but it's also some of their deferred capital that's now coming due.
Excuse me, can I say something too? Belle, also, this push to get people to walk more, to get people to bus more, trying to get more mass transit, to get cars off the street. This is also part of an initiative that Orono is part of as well. So, to try, to make sure that we can do this is really important to us. And it's important to the region, I think. So it's a push to get people to ride more buses, to be more responsible. And that's all. And that's an important aspect, I think. You have to pay for it to get, to achieve another goal. So thank you.
Totally agree with that. And I also find it really valuable. I've been running the bus system since I was a little kid, and I know a lot of Orono residents really rely on it. Am I right in assuming this is a typo about what we paid so far?
Absolutely not, because City of Bangor bills
Slowly.
very
Got it.
slowly.
Okay.
Yep.
So by the end of whenever everything comes.
We are-
together, We expect that I will be more on target.
Yeah, so we
But
anticipate,
also it's under budget because we don't have Saturday
Because of-
service.
yeah.
but we usually are pushing them when we're trying to close the books in September for our last quarter bill. So they're usually way behind.
And am I right in remembering the reason that we see a zero amount is because we shifted this from
Yep,
some other
it
sections
used to
last year?
come from debt and other, and we tried to pull everything from other that wasn't debt away that we.
Okay.
I had lots to say, though. I don't think we need to get into all this, but I do want to say there is a big narrative here, and it's appreciative, the work that goes into it. I think one of the common themes throughout here is that we can do more with more, but at the same time, we're not asking for more. In fact, we've cut in this from the IT perspective, so I appreciate that. And with the other themes are, making sure that we're communicating and full disclosure, we're getting information out. And I personally think that Jeff Gordon came and spoke, he's previous council. I think you are doing a better job. I haven't lifted a finger. So, and anybody that can go online, I feel like you can go straight to the horse's mouth from every meeting we have. And I think that's really valuable. So if there's any area where we can use help, Dan, is the people that don't go online and how we can communicate better with them. So I think that's still a piece, but I feel like great strides are made, and the fact that you can go look at an agenda and look at them, look at the minutes, see where you want to go and hear everything that's said. It's really hard to hear that we're not acting in the public, because we certainly are I think we're doing a better job than most I've seen as far as you can go straight there and hear every meeting. So I want to acknowledge that. And I do, the other piece to this, I think, is as I was thinking about it, reading the narrative, we sit in a meeting, and I'll use this last example of the union issue at the town, not at the university. And I think we sat here, there was a lot's going on, and we'd like, okay, get that out, get this information out to the public, produce this and send this out. And I sat here nodded along like, yeah, we want to do that. And what I don't know is what did that impact as far as what was going on in the office that week? I trust we're not just gonna throw something out. We don't want them just throwing something out. Here, this is what happened. And by the way, you can go to the meeting and look exactly what happened. So I think we need to empower Sophie to not push back, but to make sure we understand what impact we're having when we pivot and do things like that. Like, this is super important. We have to get this out to people because they showed up at a meeting. I think we need, I'm going to try to be more cognizant of that and thinking about what we're asking of and what does that do to the rest of the week? And because I don't know what goes on every day, different things that I can't even imagine. But in thinking about this, as I was reading through it, I could see like, okay, maybe it was Sophie's time. She had two other people proof just to make sure this is the sentiment that came out of that meeting. Does this make sense? So we've got 4 or 5 hours wrapped up into, hey, we're going to post this on our website that somebody might look at or nobody might look at. Versus maybe that's where Sophie could let us know, well, okay, so this is what that means. And maybe there's an alternative. Maybe one of the counselors respond with an email saying, hey, that meeting is going to be up tomorrow. You can get all the details. If you have any questions, reach back out to us. Because we had 8 or 9 or 10, whatever, people that had reached out and had specific. We had a lot of people show up. So I think we need to be cognizant of that and thinking about that. And again, prioritizing and delegation. We've talked that's kind of an issue. Delegation maybe is kind of an issue that we're dealing with that, it's hard for you to do sometimes. I think we need to be cognizant and allow that to happen and not kind of overrun like that probably did, if I think about how that all went down. I don't know this. I haven't talked to Sophie. I haven't talked to anybody, but just kind of seeing what goes on in the back room, I could see reading the narrative that might have been what happened. And so we could be more cognizant and allow delegation back to maybe, again, us, or maybe it's the chair, because that's usually who responds to emails. And I've really rattled on. I've got another particular line I want to look at, but I'd love to hear thoughts on my babblings.
Well, what I really like about what you said is what we could take on additionally, like when we're asking for stuff where if there's some part of it that we can do that we don't have to give to staff. Like, I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what our job should be. In both in respect of the manager and also just in like recognizing that we're part of this workflow.
I think it's really a good way to put it. Right? Is that right? We don't just generate the workflow, we have to help resolve it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
What was your other thing?
My line item. Right, it's already been brought up. The
Professional services.
professional services under that. So we're going up $4,500 to $45K. And I just looking at the history you provided in 2020, the actual was 16.5. 2021, the actual was 14.1. 2022, actual was 29.5. 2023, budgeted, we're gonna overrun because we're at 26.7 with 2 months left.
Yep, I have not booked April legal fees, March or April legal fees.
Okay, So this was printed end of April, so it's just not booked on, it's just not on there, but that's what I was going by.
No, March is in the pipeline right now. In April, I won't get April for another couple weeks. So in there, we have, Ayers Island has chewed up legal fees, liability issues around the bridge at Ayers Island. And the unionization effort has booked legal fees. I've had 3 pretty major personnel issues that have chewed fees this spring. So I think I am anticipating going over them.
Just out of curiosity with the Ayers Island, is that a back as far as funding that's on us?
Yeah,
Or is that?
yeah, because some of the questions I'm asking are about our liability when the bridge falls in the river.
Okay, so you think that 40K is going to be overrun this year?
Yeah, I do. And I'm also seeing legal rates, even don't tell Roger, our inexpensive local attorney went up on his prices, which I think is one of the first times in the time that I've been here that's happened. And our Bernstein Sure that we use for the more complex stuff has gone up on their pricing.
Okay, so because for 3 years, we've been significantly under, this is going to be overrun.
Yeah.
And Sophie, you said that 75% of that line is legal fees. What's the other 25%?
So the other 25% is anything from trying to bring a trainer in for something. Rob wants to look at planning for a capital infrastructure thing that requires engineering that isn't associated with a budget that comes in. This budget line becomes the catch-all when other departments overrun because of unforeseen circumstances. Yeah, that's the.
Well, I'm not sure how I feel about my request to cut 5 on there at this point then. That's where I was going, just for the.
Yeah. I hear you, and I wish.
Excuse me, Sophie? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm also going to say too, as observant, is that I can't remember a time at being on council besides last year where we had legal counsel in a meeting with us as much as we did. I feel like we had more meetings with legal counsel last year. I hope we don't have to have it again next year. But I know that is also time that, that we get billed for. So it was a pretty rough year last year, I think. And our legal counsel made some money, but well-deserved. I mean, they do a lot of good work. So there's not much else we can do except support this.
So I'm curious, I understand we're going to overrun this year. Are we anticipating, I know that, fees are increasing, but even with fees increasing, are we anticipating to have
Yep,
the same number of issues that are
I'm gonna
next year?
bargain a brand new contract from the very beginning that I won't do by myself. I bargain annually on my own unless we run into issues, but I'm not gonna start a brand new contract by myself. We are going into labor negotiations with both police and fire. As we have a lot of people that are on probation and new in the fire and police. So yeah, I'm anticipating that. I'm anticipating more with some economic development and potential development issues. I've been put on notice that we've got 1 or 2 requests for credit enhancement agreements coming forward. That costs money, even though they cover the review of the credit enhancement agreement. Oftentimes we need help understanding the limitations to help counsel through that discussion. I am working feverishly to try to roll out some new systems in terms of personnel. We have a really outdated personnel ordinance. We've never had a personnel manual before. If we're going to be working in a more defined way, we need to get documentation together for that, and it needs to go through legal review. So those are the big ones. But the other issue is, I've been doing this work for 23 years, and I've created a really nice base of understanding of general stuff. But as we go through and people have very specific questions, and I give kind of general answers and push back, which is absolutely fine, I need to reach out to somebody who knows more. And with a new council looking at the world differently, that I am reaching out more than I did before. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, you need the answers you need. We all can stretch and grow, but I need some help.
What do we get from Maine Municipal on those fronts? Like, for example, I would expect, and maybe that there's a boilerplate for start negotiating with this type of union within a town that we could get from Maine Municipal, or with questions that may be coming to you. Do
So
we have a resource at Maine Municipal? And the last question, what do we pay to be part of Maine Municipal?
So, dollars a year, somewhere in that neighborhood in general for Maine Municipal Services. I think I have picked up the phone and called Dave Barrett, who is their HR person who sells labor services as well. They can get some information for free, basic stuff. When it comes to bargaining, I would pay to have Dave at the table. And that might be a little bit smaller than having Matt Teresevich at the table, but it comes with its own set of baggage. He normally bargains with small companies, boards of selectmen. It's a different environment. I would say the problem with getting boilerplate contracts is I've got two. I can call other municipalities and get other ones. What I want is representation at the table with their Boston attorney to be able to create a foundation that makes sense for Orono. And that's just new for me. All of my training is based on managing an existing contract. So I do think that that's going to take time. And I'm hoping, because they're from away, that we can do it on Zoom like we do with a different bargaining unit that has representation based in Portland, which saves a lot of money. But yeah, so the answer to what we get from MMA, we get a lot of stuff. I can call and ask very general questions. So Rob Yerxa wanted to know about changing a service in the cemetery. That's a generic state law question, and I didn't have time to go through state law. So I picked up the phone and called MMA. I waited a day and got a call back because I'm one of 491 people calling in, communities using that service. Get a lot of help through our loss control. Risk management is probably where we are the heaviest user of MMA services. You have to be a member in order to access their insurance pool, but it's more than that. It's the education and outreach that we get from them. Advocacy. So I haven't done it in a while, but when we wanted to change the law to allow the crossing guard to move traffic, control traffic, MMA was right beside us, helping me navigate that process, working with legislators, helping us find a solution there. General questions, that's a big thing. Just in general, I have a handful of people down there. They are giving us the access to our cultural competency and implicit bias onboarding training for $100 for anybody we want to put through for a year. So that's a pretty good deal. Training as a member, we get essentially half price, and it's training that somewhat control in that if I call and make a really big stink and get other managers to do the same thing, we can usually direct.
And they have a huge university.
Yeah.
Of safety.
Leadership, a little bit of leadership stuff there.
So we leverage that for workplace safety law.
Yeah, we can use all of that. And then Shelley, of course, uses it for election, Secretary of State and also MMA.
So the other thing I would just say is when I was in a much smaller community, I at one point held the distinction of being the #1 caller to Maine Municipal Legal Services. And they are great for that background, general stuff. But if it gets any level of complexity or has to do with another community, they will send you to your town attorney. So.
And they're probably not liable for. any
No,
place
that's
that
the thing.
you-
It's not a lawyer, an attorney-client situation. So like, no, I wouldn't do, they used to have somebody there who was extremely good at personnel issues, legal personnel issues. That person has retired and they have more generalists now. So that's not somebody it's not a place I would go for that.
Mhm.
Helpful?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's helpful.
thanks.
Yeah, I had a couple questions, but back out of the line items, just on page 5, just some things I wanted to be sure I understood in the narrative. I think you answered this a bit. You were talking about creating more formal personnel manual. That was a question I had. Do we have one at all right now, or just the chapter in the ordinances and that's it?
We have the ordinance and a few scattered policies. For a very long time, municipalities were discouraged from having HR manuals. That has changed. It has been an item that has been on our to-do list for a long time. We're having a hard time kind of getting there. But it is, I've started to work through the bones of one. There are changes that need to happen to the ordinance. That ordinance is really outdated.
Yeah, I saw.
And leaves room for interpretation, because when you think about what was written in 1980, for example, we're going to use conflict resolution, right? In the municipal world in 1980, what they really meant was we're not going to hit each other and we're not going to scream and yell at each other and swear at each other. And there have been some interpretations that like, well, this is the conflict resolution method I want, and this is the one that I want. And the fact is we need to kind of, what we really mean by that is we are not going to be disrespectful in the way we do it. So I think that there are language shifts and benefit shifts and just kind of the way we operate.
Makes sense. The other question I had was sort of, I think this got talked about at Monday, but can you provide us at some point with the rest of this plan for the increases in staff
Yep,
pay, just so we know what's coming exactly in that? Okay, and is there a pay plan in general that we have access to as council?
So there is the pay scale. Right now, the pay plan, we're off the pay scale because we had one pay scale. We have a pay plan to try to get us to the next pay scale. I can show you both of those.
That'd be great. I just would like.
One
to
of
see-
them is probably not going to make any sense to you because it didn't to me until I had worked with it for a while. The other one is a little bit more directive in terms of telling you what it's for and how to use it.
Okay. And my other question's about, you mentioned the high staff turnover, which I know has been a struggle. Do we have some data about that? Do we do any exit surveys with people when they leave? Do we have any data on what people have to say about why they're leaving when they leave?
Yep. We do, we run the gamut from formal exit interviews to chatting with people, depending in some part on the situation and the relationship. For example, if I walked into Public Works, there are some people that if I asked to sit down with me, they would just say, everything is great, everything is great. Whereas with Rob, they would say, I actually have a document that kind of lists out turnover and reasons. Under reasons, I have written resignation, just general. And then I have taken all the reasons that have been given to me and jumbled them up below so that they were not identifiable, because I have not gone back through every single person and determined what was public and what was not. So what I am hearing now, we get some people that it's just not a good fit. That we do, for some people, we push people here to perform. We've had some folks come from other sectors that it's not as fast paced as they are looking for. We have other people that apply for a job and really think it's, even though we say it's a laborer, it's a laborer, it's a laborer. When we get to the springtime and it's not sitting in a truck anymore and it's laboring, they're not happy. We get other people who we had one just recently who came to us. We adjusted our pay scale to get them. And they left because their former employer offered them $4 an hour more. I can't compete with that. Other people, we are pretty short bench in terms of small staff, not a lot of room for development and growth. And one of the things we're seeing from some of our newer employees, professional development and growth and getting kind of moving up a ladder is really important to them. And it just kind of doesn't exist in many of our departments. Hearing from others, Sarah, that they are burnt out working with the public. And I will just say, the public has shifted. And when you have a job that you are forward facing every single day, 10 hours a day, it gets tiring. Other folks have family issues. I've got a whole document.
Yeah, we can look at more another time. I just wondered if we were tracking it. That was really my only question, because I know it's hard when we have staff turnover. It's hard on you and it's hard on coworkers. So I just wondered what we were tracking. Sounds great.
I would add, I did just kind of arbitrarily look at 2020 just to see how many new hires we had, and there were 8 according to the schedule that we had, which with 80 something people, I don't know that that's high.
I don't.
And the other thing I looked, there was one that was in the office downstairs, one was code, 2 police, 1 public works, 2 library, and 1 at the PCF. So we've got, I mean, that's really 1 person, different departments. I don't, to me, that didn't jump out as a.
So
as a flag.
for us, that is more than normal, but there is a shift in the workforce too.
Yep.
And I think municipalities have been on the tail end of that, where it used to be you come to work for a town and the expectation is you would do your whole career there, anywhere from 20 to 40 years. And what would drive people there is the benefits, retirement, the time off, that kind of stuff. One of the things we're noticing is that the private sector is beginning to get as rich in benefit, or not be as rich, but bring the benefits along in terms of time off and things like that. And we're hiring more and more people that don't care about, I mean, they care about a lot of things, but they don't seem to care as much about benefits. So, I mean,
Or they don't understand our retirement plan requires over a 10% match from the town. And you're not going to get that in the private sector. But somebody who is 22, 23 coming in, it doesn't mean as much to them as maybe it used to be, that you could work 25 years and then have a pension, because they don't understand what a pension is. So, you know, that's a big cost that we have that they don't see as a benefit.
And I think the other thing is that was printed, the base information for that report that you were looking at was printed in February. We've brought on 3 new firefighters for the Safer Grant and.
No, I randomly picked 2020.
Oh,
So that
okay.
wasn't even, that was kind of arbitrarily, I just randomly picked it. And the
Yeah.
reason I picked it was because there was a lot of talk, just going through all of the requirements and what has to be done. And it had me thinking like, okay, what's the I'm trying to figure out what's the magnitude of turnover and how much hiring, and which led me to the question, I assume if WPCF needs someone, I assume there's some administration piece that is done on this side. I assume that the directors and the departments are kind of overseeing somewhat their hiring process, or because if they're not, I guess that goes back to a delegation thing in my mind.
So Our department heads are very good at running their departments. They, like you said, they don't necessarily hire somebody every year. There are some pretty strict guidelines on how we hire, how we interact with candidates, what kind of questions are allowed to be asked, et cetera. So other than police and fire, who have hiring processes that are kind of laid out in contract and policy, but even they get quite a bit of guidance from the town manager's office. Essentially, Sophie and I together share HR duties. We don't have an HR person. We are the HR people. And typically you'd have an HR director who would guide all of the hiring processes and the onboarding and whatever. We've tried to help with technology somewhat. We went to ADP. That's what we're using for our recruitment. We can manage our onboarding through that. We can manage the bringing in the resumes, going out to all the different resources where we post the jobs. But our department heads are part of the interviews, but that's pretty much all that they do in terms of the hiring process. And of course, they're saying, we'd like to hire this person.
All right.
Can I interrupt for just a minute and I'm being mindful of time, and I also wanted.
Carol's up on the board too.
Okay, one quick second. I'm mindful of time. I want to also say how appreciative I am of the tiered service level diagram that we have at the end of this section. And that I think is really essential to what our job is as counselors, is determining, are we providing the right service level for our community? In general, we seem to be at the 2 to 3 tier, which may be the right fit, right? So that might be just a way for us to contextualize a lot of kind of the various lines that we're seeing. So I want to move on, but I don't want to cut Cheryl off if she had a question about this section before we move ahead.
No, I just wanted to make an observation that the question of interviewing and bringing on new personnel is questioned as to, for me, it sounded like the professionalism of our staff. And I think we have 2 incredibly professional women running our staff. And that's another point that I wanted to make in that argument. So, let's not forget that as well. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on and talk about finance department a little bit. Yes.
Can I just highlight a couple of things that I had brought up for potential consideration? Was to reduce in the town manager's budget, there is a public health line. We fund that at $3,000 a year. The intent with that is the first $2,000 is an annual contribution to the Bangor area homeless shelter. And the remaining $1,000 is there to help us when we have situations with people who don't qualify for general assistance, and it's not a fire department public health response. And there's that kind of group of people in the middle. And if there's money left over, the rest of it has historically gone to the local domestic violence shelter because they provide that overnight piece, which is, I think, what we were trying.
Sophie, there's a typo in the budget impacted lines there. It's 910-966.
Oh,
Just so you know.
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Are you saying you suggested that as a cut in this document handed out
So-
first thing today?
So let me suggest that I'm not suggesting anything. I think that that's a really important contribution, given the relationship that council has asked me to have in the city of Bangor.
Yep.
That's where the homeless shelter piece came from, and also meeting the needs of our citizen. However, when asked what can get pulled out kind of as standalone, that is one of those things. The other thing that I,
So is that,
again,
so that's a service level decision. is what
that's a
you're saying.
service level decision.
SLD. is what we call it.
SLD, I like
In my
that.
notes.
You're really good at the acronym. piece.
No, it's just, I know what the letters are that start each of those words.
The other one is not a recommendation at all, but again, a SLD. Is on the general fund as opposed to WPCF. The town allocates $5,000 a year towards the employee wellness program. We marry that with, in this budget, $1,500 from WPCF and Maine Municipal Health Trust grant that we get for employee wellness. What the $5,000 allows us to do, it pretty much funds the Work Fit program, which is a healthy lifestyle primarily based around healthy bodies and working out, diet, nutrition, that kind of stuff. We buy passes to the University of Maine punch. We get charged for every visit that an employee makes. We get it on the same deal as the university charges itself internally. Belle and I followed this very carefully when we implemented it many years ago. And our goal at that point is the lifestyle claim. So we don't get claims history that is identifiable. They group it in ways that would not be identifiable. So they've created this grouping in our rating because we're individually rated as an entity because we're big enough, called lifestyle claims. And you can argue with whether it's lifestyle or genetics, but things like diabetes. When we were crunching the numbers with this, the number of people with diabetes claims didn't change. The cost of those claims came down significantly because we had people who were active, working out, trying to be healthy.
And in some cases, all the working out consisted of was, it was enough encouragement to get them to go for a walk. And that was more than their current activity level, but it's brought down their numbers and reduced, kind of the impact on our health insurance.
So it started there as a financial business decision to try to get our health insurance premiums under control. What it has morphed into, especially with the generation of work employees that we have right now, is really seen as a benefit, an increased sense of belonging. People are working out together, people are. So when we look at things that can come out, the service level decrease here is a service level to our employees. So you don't hear me saying we should do this, because if I thought we should do it, it wouldn't have been. I think those.
And can I say too, it also makes it a great place to work. I mean, people want to work in a place that their management wants to keep them healthy and happy. So it's also a productive move. So thank you for that.
The last thing I put on here is something you can do. Again, it's an SLP. And it's for me, is reduce the manager's professional services line by 3,500. It's a wild, crazy to go to 5. That would cause me not to have kind of the little bit I have thought about in there to extend our ongoing supervisory and leadership training for all of the department head management team, which would include deputies and supervisors. It is the implementation of our DEI initiatives and the resources, the additional resources to employees that I talked about kind of being catch-all. And then it's about the fact that given what's going on with legal and the increase in fees, I think there's a significant likelihood that we will overrun. But you can cut the budget.
Which one was that in?
That's
First
10,
page.
11, 690, 610.
The last one on the first page.
Okay.
So that's what I have in mind.
I think it's really helpful to see this. I know we just got this
Yeah.
today, and you're saying that we're planning to have another version of this, well, not this one, but the same thing ready for our conversation next week, by next Thursday?
No, I was saying I would get you the personnel staffing documents that people had asked for.
Okay.
This is the
This is
doc,
all of them.
this
Okay.
is all of it.
Great.
At this point, I mean,
Okay.
I live for your direction.
We can ask for more.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for this today, though.
Okay. So let's move on to the next section, which is the finance section, and I have questions, but I'd rather hear from others first. So if people have questions or concerns regarding, start on page 16. I think.
Mhm.
I asked about the one that jumps to things.
You go for it.
All right. So we have a line that jumps from $750 to $11,000.
So we've talked about this. This $9,000 of this involves the agreement to fund on a loan basis, essentially a master's program over the next 2 years for the soon to be finance director. So the loan piece with this, if you recall, is that this individual will pay upfront tuition and they will get their degree. They will stay for 5 years after the degree is received. Each year that they stay, 20% of the amount the town paid will be forgiven. So when you get to 5 years, it will be completely forgiven. And if you recall, we had that conversation because there are some other issues around that.
And I just want to mention that although this is a specific case, it's not a unique case in history.
No, I think, well, there had been a period where we had talked about a degree, advanced degree work that I was planning to do with the same kind of deal. The pandemic hit, and quite honestly, I don't have that. The other thing that we have done also in this department, which is kind of the rest of the increase, is we have an individual who was hired conditionally for their position. It included finishing up an associate's degree, and well, it's not the entire amount. There was a small amount that we give reimbursement for, which we do with professional development.
So this is also the line I had a question on, and that answers a lot of it, but I guess my question comes back around to, do we have any, is this going to be part of what will hopefully get developed in a personnel policy for what our procedures are for graduate work or for?
Yeah, yeah. I think also the general rule of thumb outside of the two public safety collective bargaining units, which have come up with their very different approaches. In general, the rule of thumb that we apply here as to whether or not we pay for it in general, whether it's matriculated degree or coursework, is what is the need of the town. And if we're hiring somebody who is, and most of the time it would be a promotion that we would hire somebody that doesn't meet the minimum standards. The goal that has been stated here, we'll use this example, is that we want a finance director and we want the town manager to stop being the finance director. I think a finance director needs an MBA. Or an MPA, which an MPA is a great thing too. So when we look at the town need, so if Bell came to me and said, I want a degree in engineering, but I would say, what is the tie to what I need for that position? And whether it is a course at a time or it is a full degree or certificate program. There are times people want, I've got somebody right now who is working on a doing fine arts stuff and I don't reimburse the cost of that, but I have allowed a flexible schedule so that they can do that. So we've always prioritized professional development and sometimes that's creative development.
Okay, and the current one you said is paid, it's over a 5-year time period for each year the person stays, we waive a certain amount of that loan.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding this section of the budget?
Quick process question, do we do the payroll in-house or does that? Get someone?
So Zach is our primary payroll workhorse with Bell as his backup.
Depends on what you consider
Doing
doing
it.
payroll.
Yeah, so we use ADP for that. So Zach and Bell are doing the time card review, making sure that we are getting everything input correctly. And then ADP actually does the physical payroll with all the tax implications and all that stuff.
And submits it to the feds and the state and yeah.
All right, so we do use a service for the actual.
Yeah, when I first got here, we didn't, and I will say that's a mistake because you have to stay current and understand what all the rules are and they are shifting and changing.
I have one more quick question, I think, Jeff. This jumps between page 16, goodness, 17. I just wanted to be clear. So on page 60, under capital asset software, you have already included in the budget, correct? This 14,500.
Yep.
But on page 17, this 18,000 to 25,000, you have not included in the budget. That's like a future wish thing. Am I understanding correctly?
That is, well, yeah, but.
Okay,
Um,
just checking.
So I'm gonna come back to expectations, right? When I first started here, council got a budget that was about 10 pages long. And here you go. And then we added comments to it, and then we added narrative to it. And so you're up to about 360 pages. When you look at the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association standard for municipal budgeting, they have a template that you use that is not this. This is a good approximation, but they now have software that drives through that process where department heads would have the ability to input their information in a different way that is not as clunky, cumbersome, and a lot of back office work goes into that. And everything would be digital. So counselors would get a link, like, here's your budget. And there would be ways for counselors to get into it and to communicate with it. So that is the industry kind of gold standard. I will say that as a community the size of Orono, that's kind of on the bubble until you start getting calls for, we want more transparency. We want to be able to compare things. We want those individual data points to be able to be flexed all over the place. We want it to look pretty. We want pictures. We want. If that's important to council, I guess what I'm saying is we are tapping out our resource to get the budget book done. If you want more, or you want it to not be the same draw on attention to get it done, this is a place you need to go.
Yeah.
The asset management, if I had to prioritize, asset management far exceeds budget books.
That one's for sure. You need it.
And that's, but we're gonna discuss that.
When we get to
Public
the
works, so
public works,
Rob
yeah.
Yerxa is the kind of overseer of asset management with me.
Got it.
And so just echoing what she just said, the budget books is not in this budget, correct?
And when I wrote my narrative, neither was asset management. And then I made a decision at more than the 11th hour to put that in. So if you see conflicts, it's because I didn't catch all of them.
What is the financial system that we use?
We use Trio.
Trio?
And it is a delightful piece of software.
It's a municipality's financial services software.
And, I think it's important that we maintain a municipal financial services software. It integrates multiple functions of what we do. We are moving to Trio Web right now. So we have an older version right now of Trio SQL, which we moved to, 6 years ago or so. Trio Web there's not a lot of discussion in the book because it is not costing $5,000 or more to do it. But it is we're hoping we'll get some better functionality out of it.
Is there who is the designated Trio wizard in the town?
Well, it
Depends on
What are you talking about? If you're talking about how the general ledger interfaces with expenses and fund accounting right now, I'd say that's me. If you're talking about general journals and posting and stuff like that, that would be Zach. If you're talking about keeping it up and operating, that would be Bell.
You're talking about registering your car, any of the town clerk functions, that's Shelley. Billing for sewer, et cetera.
Taxes would be me still, but we're getting away from that.
So can I ask too, how much of this is also updating and making sure that the system is current with current standards and things like that? I mean, you have to be technologically savvy these days. And as a municipality, things sometimes go really fast. My phone goes really fast. So, we have to be cognizant of the bigger picture as well, because sometimes if you don't update when you can, it just gets twice as expensive, and then you're always kicking the can. And I am not a kick the can, in case you didn't know, down the road. So again, these are updates that we need to really take seriously, or we're going to pay for it in the future. Thank you.
Clear with about any sort of updates, right? I was just asking about
Yeah.
this software, and my line of questioning is coming from if we had a true Trio wizard. And I get you only want certain people going in, but could that facilitate answering questions and producing data that we might be asking for better than we are today?
So if you're asking for data that is in Trio,
We can produce it.
we can produce it very quickly. When you ask me to go do employee counts for 20 years or 10 years, I'm doing that manually, going through budgets and annual reports to try to figure out who we had where. So that's not in Trio. It's nothing that we've ever.
And I would assume with the budget books, we wouldn't be going and putting all of that real old stuff in. That seems like a.
So budget books, no. The other thing that happened 17 or 18 is we had a major shift in the chart of accounts. The way that we report our financial data. So 19 is a good place to start. What Trio doesn't do, and I don't know if others do it, is each year for Trio is a discrete set of data. And so the only place I can get comparative reports is in the budget process. And that's the one that I can manipulate many different ways if I know what you want. But I can't go into Trio and even look at like what we've paid a vendor over years without pulling different reports for each year.
So one of the and I think, Leo, what you might be asking about also is, can we create our own reports? So like within ADP, I have the ability to create non-standard reports that connect non-related items, because ADP has a very robust report builder. Trio does not have that same kind of robust report builder where I could code a report. It's just, it's not a functionality that Trio offers. It would be handy, and if they had it, we'd use it, but they don't. And things like, we can export numbers out of ADP as well, but they don't necessarily correspond to the exact request. So it does, it just depends on what's being asked for.
And so back to as far as upgrade, Cheryl, I think, no, that's not even a conversation because we're going to the web version. And maybe we get more functionality when you do that. I don't know. But I mean, there's no question here on the table. Whether
Well,
Maybe you do-
that was actually a question. It wasn't rhetorical. It was a question. How much of this is upgrade? And if it isn't, I'm just saying that I was wondering. So thank you.
So we don't know how much of it's really gonna be upgrades. We have to we're in a play environment right now, working towards pulling our data to be able to see what we can do. So when I got here, we had a system called Unifund that the town paid over $100,000 a year to maintain. We have moved to Trio, which is about 30-ish when you add it up in all the different departments. The issue with Unifund is it was not a main-based piece of software, and only I think 3 municipalities in Maine used it at the peak, and York left, we left, and Gardner left. So and it couldn't do some of the things around tax collection and some of the stuff that you need. What we get with Trio is a very clunky piece of municipal software that has the market for small and mid-sized communities. And when Bureau of Motor Vehicle changes the way they want something done for motor vehicles, or there's a change in the assessing law, we're not having to pay to have our system change because there's enough of a market that they go in and build the new reports and the new systems. When we looked at Trio, we looked at Munis, which I think is a Tyler. I would love to do that. Munis is a lot more expensive. And when you talk to users, it's clunky in a different way. I mean, they all have their issues. And at this point, I have department heads that can pull financial reports and aren't asking me for those anymore. I have
Which we used to have to do for them with Unifund.
I have a town clerk that can manage all the stuff that people know the system right now. If you asked me to change, I would not be happy.
I do remember when the town went out for it and I was advocating from the outside that Tyler Technology or Munis at the time was a main company. And I felt they should get points for being a main company and stopping the brain drain out of Maine. And
So Trio was built by a Maine assessor. It started out as an assessing program built in Maine. And just in the last 2 decades, I think it got gobbled up by Harris, which is an outside company.
all right, sorry to digress, but it was relevant.
Okay, our next section, debt service.
So this is all of the town debt that is funded by the general fund. So you'll see town debt in the TIF budgets or economic development budget. You'll see town debt in WPCF. This is everything else. The new debt here is the loader.
The what?
Loader.
Right, so it said proposed purchase. Didn't we already purchase it? It says proposed.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
That was my question. I'm like, what is this? Because I thought we bought it. Good.
We did. You
Good.
can line that out.
Okay, thank you.
I like to see all these minuses.
Just be aware that this is FY '24 is the last year before we kick into so when we refunded our debt in 2020, there was 4 years of a bond that could not be refinanced. So we created a kind of a wonky amortization schedule to allow us to pay that one off. The jump is not enormous, but there will be a little bit of a bubble
Next year.
in the next 3 years, I think.
Gotcha.
Or one of these current lines or just a different line?
I can go back and get the amortization schedules, but it's where you see 2020. So if you're on page 22 and you look at 810, 801, Public Works Infrastructure 2020A, that's Series A. So we had Series A, which was new debt, and Series B, which was refunded debt or refinanced debt. The Series B is the one that has kind of a little wonky twist in the amortization schedule.
So that one goes up and it's gonna go up more next year. Yeah, okay, got it.
This is the payment, right?
The what?
These are the payments we're looking at.
Yep.
Where is the principal?
Principal, it starts with a P, interest starts with an I. If you look at
So you'll notice here, you've got your principal for the 2020A, and then here you have your interest for the 2020A. So this is the same bond, but principal payment here, interest payment down here.
I mean, sorry,
Oh, what was the total amount that was borrowed?
what's left in principal?
I could get you the schedule and I can write that out for you. I don't.
Okay, gotcha. So this is.
So we're in
principal and
the-
interest.
we're-
Yeah, I meant like, what do we have left on? these?
Oh, if you look in the audit, Leo, it's right there. Gotcha. You like me to get that for you?
Don't print it for them, send it to them electronically.
Right.
Can we vote on that? No, we can't vote. We don't mind that.
Can't vote.
Not to send paper stuff.
So on page 25, the one that says debt, I don't know what principal fire engine there. I just had a question. Over on the side in the explanations, it says the annual payment is 78,090, 73 or whatever, but it doesn't look like that's actually what our annual payment
If you
has been. So I'm trying
add
to figure that
the
out.
two, you add the principal and
The interest, I should get that
you
number.
should come
Okay,
up to that.
Perfect.
Most municipal bonds and most definitely the ones we do through, not the general obligation floating our own bonds, but the commercial lending ones.
Mhm.
We like the same payment that we do more interest at the beginning, less principal, and then turn it
Yeah.
on the other side.
So if I go down to this debt, interest, fire engine and add that together, I will get that number.
You should.
Now I understand. Thank you.
You should.
Thank you.
So you do have something that shows schedule, like what we have left and what the schedule is?
So we have a book that's this thick that is just dealing with our current debt with amortization schedules galore. And I have it on spreadsheet, but I can't name it off the top.
All right, no further questions or concerns right now with that part. Let's move on to IT. Right.
So it seems to me like the biggest change on here is that we've let a staff person go and we're doing some more consulting services as a result. Is that accurate? Yeah, and so I guess the question I had about that was just, I also saw a notation in the written narrative about for this year, we're doing this. So is this something we're just trialing and we'll see how this works? Or is this something we're already done long enough? We think it does work. I don't have any idea when it started or.
So it started a little after mid-year.
Uh-huh.
And at this point in time, I think we're having quite a bit of success, but we also know things cycle.
Yeah.
And I'm not confident to say this is the absolute way to do it.
Sure. But am I correct that, I mean, we're looking at like pretty significant savings at the top, the first, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, correct? At least are all savings. with that position gone, and the only additions are down under professional services, under consultant services and mapping services? Or is
And
there
there's-
something
there's
else I'm missing?
cloud-based computing, and that was, I think, in the justification as sort of a different
Okay.
priority,
So cloud-based
but
computing.
that was another big jump too.
I think my answer is yes.
Yeah, more or less, I got it.
Mhm.
Okay. Good to know.
Um,
And if we went back, if you didn't work this next year and we went back to a actual staff position, you envision these extra consulting fees would go away. They're not permanent fees. They're there to replace this job.
Yeah.
Good. Got it.
Question that I had is we're showing that it's percentage wise, it's a big increase, but overall a slight increase in security systems. We had a discussion several months ago about the integrity of our municipal security. So I'm glad to see that that line is increased, right? Because that's a concern. But for a budget this big and a town with this many employees, I'm wondering I don't want to spend more money, but is that an adequate amount to pay for security?
So, the world has changed how they charge you for things instead of, charging you an upfront fee and going away. They nibble at you every year. So, I'm actually adding, several suggested monitoring, programs. So one of the changes that we've done is the way I can access all of our computers right from my computer. So that's one increase. Then there is infiltration monitoring software that this considers, and then there's a couple other recommendations from the insurance company that we are including. And a big chunk of the consultant services that we're hoping to be able to tackle is that we can start writing these business continuity plans and the other types of plans that the insurance company wants, using the expertise from the consultant that I don't have, but I know our systems. So this way we can use expertise, people who have degrees in networking and consultants have lots of different specialists. So I am a very shallow generalist. I can usually fix your printer for you. I can usually get you back online, but when our server crashed in March, we had a plan in place to do the server migration, but when it crashed, that was an immediate phone call. My server's screaming, you guys need to show up. And that's kind of what the consultants do.
Just ask, when you say server crashed, is that like the Trio server?
Could ask. So currently we do host our Trio software on a virtual server. It's one of 4 virtual servers on one physical machine.
It's physically here.
That's physically here. The great thing about virtual servers, I think of them as like little self-contained snow globes. So you can take them off of that one physical server that is failing and put them onto another server. So they, all the data is self-contained and was backed up also by Gemini, which is the Trio backup service. When we switch to Trio Web, we are having them host it. And when they host the data, they have it backed up in multiple places, and they have it on multiple pieces of hardware.
That's it. So it's, that is automatically going to harden it.
Yes.
And that,
And takes a whole lot of, and we were having issues where every Monday morning, the Trio server had to be restarted. And I'm just like, please last until March 31st. And it said March 13th was the end of its line.
so I don't know, I'm just speaking to Jeff's concern. I feel like that must be our biggest, that's that's where everything is. And the most important piece of our emails down, It's not like
Well, and-
catastrophic.
And emails are also part of our cloud
It's
service. But we do have a hosted network here, all of our computers within the town, except for the library, because they are part of the main schools and library network. But all of the computers, whether it's out at Public Works or WPCF, we're all networked together, hosted, DNS, all of that comes out of here. All dark fiber connected back to the town office. So that allows us to control over our network security, because we only have one pipe out essentially that into the big world. But at the same time, it does mean that we have hardware and systems here that we have to continue to maintain. Not as much critical data, but if the systems go down here, they go dark everywhere.
And then we have two other kind of separate systems and security issues over in public safety, right?
Yes, so that's a completely different topic. So I don't know, Cheryl, if she was on topic. Cheryl, did you have something that was on this particular thing?
Well, the things that I want to talk about, you guys, speaking of technology, you need to look up occasionally. No, I was going to ask Belle a question, so it's a separate question. So I'll wait until you're done with this, but I do have a question for Belle specifically in the areas of concern and what she meant by what that area of concern was. So if you want to wait, I will wait until we get there.
I don't think it matters one way or the other. So what Sophie's talking about is a capital, as part of a capital project that is in facilities. And if you were to go see our IT closet at the public safety building right now, it is literally in the middle of the workout room. So it's an open rack, and it was okay. And then they got a great grant for workout equipment, and suddenly the room is gone. It's not climate controlled. It is where the main connection in for our phones comes. It is, in theory, where the second physical location. So we should
Don't say
have.
too much.
I know, we should have I have redundant servers, and they should be in separate buildings. And they are not, because that is a bad place to put them. And then the cabling system or the cabling network that's over there was one of these homegrown projects. So I can't tell you where any port goes without doing a lot of research. Things aren't labeled, things aren't in trays. And it's in an open environment. So the proposal is to move it into a climate controlled closet, to improve the rack system, to actually put in the second server, the redundant server, so that we are continuing to harden our infrastructure.
And which line is that?
Section?
Yeah, which line is
No,
that?
that's a capital project
Okay,
that's
coming later. Got it,
in
okay.
facilities, and it is 125,000, and there's multiple pieces to that
So
project.
this is Belle's little piece. Rob will talk to you about the rest of it. So just remember, there's the IT piece, and we'll make sure Belle's here that.
Cheryl has been waiting. Excuse me. Cheryl, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. And it was when you were talking about consultants, and I think I was curious what Belle meant when she said consultants' time will be spent on resolving tickets versus moving forward or making forward progress. And I was just curious, like, what that meant. Like, what does it mean to when consultants spent time on tickets rather than making progress?
So, if we have, a switch go down, for example, and I can't just take a backup piece of hardware off the shelf and put it in and plug all the little cables in, if that switch has to be programmed, that's a ticket that the consultant would have to resolve, because I don't have that expertise. And rather than working on a business continuity plan or a recovery plan, or I don't really want to talk about, then they would be spending time resolving things that are broken versus moving projects forward. There are other projects that we're working on that to bring our whole system into best management.
Mm-hmm.
We have discovering little Easter eggs as we go along. For example, when we were planning our server transition, we discovered that the town's Active Directory domain name, which was OFD, we didn't actually own. So a significant amount of consultant time was spent bringing us to a domain name that the town actually owns. So, you know, and it's probably one of those things that the Orono Fire Department was the first one to be networked, and then it kind of organically grew over the years, and suddenly it's the whole town, and OFD is really, I think it's a company out in Oregon.
You said something about having a full year of experience. How close are we to that?
So we had a few months in the summer, and then we've had almost 4 months now experience. I have, and part of that has been, we've had a server crash, but also planned forward moving out off of that OFD domain that we didn't own to an Orono domain that we do own. So some, either that is ticket, part of that is forward progress.
Okay. I see you listed it as an area of concern, and it sounds a little concerning to me as well. So I was just curious how that unfolded. So thank you.
Like Sophie's personnel ordinance. The hope would be that there's enough budget in there that we can have legal review of a personnel ordinance change. If other things come up, you do the other things that are more urgent, and then you push the projects further down the road.
I also think that part of what we were talking about is the fact that this is a new setup for us. And we know that the ticketing system can kind of come in waves, fits and starts, and we want to kind of watch that. I'm hoping that the new ticketing system too will allow our IT director to like go on vacation and not be standing on top of the mountain while her boss calls her because everything isn't working. Okay, so we need to kind of figure that out.
That was a cabin on the lake, Rangeley Lake, but yes.
So
Okay, I am not trying to cut down any sort of explanation, but I am aware of the time, the amount of executive budget we still have to go through. So I would see if there are any other questions that are IT budget. Not, maybe we can move on to our next section in general government.
Clerk's office.
Clerk's office.
Page 32.
Yeah. You guys are having it. So shift gears a little bit and talk about the town clerk's office, which is several parts.
Not that I don't like it when things aren't going up. That's great that it doesn't go up, but I was curious, the salary line here doesn't look like it's going up and all the other salary lines have been. Is there a reason this one isn't stepping
Yeah,
up?
there sure is. So we have a town clerk who has been with us for a while. But both of the assistant clerks have turned over. And so we took people with a few years of tenure and we're able to bring new people in who a town clerk is and assistant clerks, that most of the time is a position that you bring in somebody with a good set of bones to be able to learn and train them. So there is quite a bit of difference between the first year and the third year salary there. I would just say one of those people is my bookkeeper now, so it's not
That turned over.
that turned
I'm
over.
gonna say, Archie, you have one vacant still?
So the vacant one, she's actually gonna start.
It's gonna start on Monday. We were waiting for graduation.
Thanks.
And yes, the town clerk is getting a raise. That's part of the plan.
Excuse me. Other questions or concerns in this section of the budget?
Page 39, still part of this section.
That is the next.
Is it the next section?
That's the next
Okay,
section.
sorry, I'm ahead.
All right, but we can move along if there are no.
I just wanted to double check my understanding of this. I'm looking at page 36 and the elections and voter registration. And so my understanding is that maybe year to date for this year, we spent less because there wasn't a huge election this year. And so, but
We have one more.
twenty
election.
twenty-four would be, oh, there's one more. Okay, great.
It's June.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so that is happening before the fiscal year. I was thinking ahead to November. Cool,
We'd like to do that.
I'm sure.
One that I would just point out is Trio. We have vendor cost, ballot and coding under 66, 633. That is truly just vendor cost, not necessarily ballots and coding. This increase has to do with what we think will be a new site approved by council for the November election that does have a rental.
Old site, the parking lot will be torn up. Our usual November site.
So,
I like,
general assistance.
yeah.
You can start. This is page 30, I think, 39. Doesn't look like any changes requested.
No, and I just remind folks that 70% of these expenses are reimbursed. So on the revenue side, you see VA revenue, which is why we put an amount in and we hope to, of course, come in at budget, but if we go over budget, it is not a dollar for dollar hit to the.
So I just had a question. I'm a little confused about the 40,384 number on the bottom right. Where is that coming from since everything above it is a zero?
So that's for the entire division,
So that goes back and does include all the other things we
That's
just looked at.
all the things you just
Okay,
looked at.
that's what I was trying to figure out. Thank you. So it's not really a separate section. This is still for
Yep.
accounting purposes, part of the previous.
Yep.
Thank you.
Part of those trio bugs. that
Gotta love
can't
it.
Quite work out.
Yeah, it's all good. Thanks.
I think it's important to note for council that when we think about the town clerk's office, we have a perennial request in for a part-time individual to work down there. And it's a perennial, we'll deal with it a different way answer. So Shelley right now is on vacation and the bookkeeper and the public safety, police public safety, admin support person are splitting time to cover the front desk. That works right now because we have people, but with turnover, I don't know that that would be something, if we brought a different bookkeeper on as an example, I'm probably not going to teach them how to be an assistant clerk. That's an awful lot. So just highlighting for you that there's an awful lot of puzzle pieces to make the front desk work, but very, very limited staffing.
But in the normal situation, we'd have 2 people there also, which we don't right now until Monday.
Yes, so in a normal situation, you have 2. I will tell you, in the last 3 years, we've had many situations where our town clerk is sitting out front, registering motor vehicles, which 15 years ago wouldn't have been a big deal at all. Now, there's so much back office reporting work and compliance stuff that happens that slows everything down when that happens. So just letting you know, when you see this department, we could easily put another half-time person in there. We are cobbling it together so we don't have to. But I want to point out that we could have thrown with legit back up for that.
Nothing. I got something, but nothing.
Wait, go ahead.
We're video, no.
All right, so you tell me after.
It's immaterial.
Now we're all really curious.
Yeah. It's all right on a kiosk. We're gonna have a Shelley kiosk downstairs.
One last, if everybody's good with GA.
I just want to mention again, I really like the tiered service level diagram that you've given us. It looks like we're at the previous section, we were in level 2, 3, and this one we 10 to 3, 4, which is really where I'd like to see it. We're front facing, we're much more receptive to the public. The only tier 2 that sticks out to me is on licensing, and it seems like you're confident, and the department heads are confident that businesses have access to the people they need to have access to, but
Yep, I think yeah, and I think when it falls apart, it's internal where it's falling apart. So people don't tend to see it. I think the other piece is that is definitely a tier 2 is around lien, tax collection and liening. And when we brought the bookkeeper up, part of the reason that we were so excited to bring her upstairs is because we're hoping to transfer that to finance. But we're not there yet.
okay, so our last section this evening is on insurance.
Drop it.
We would not be complying with state law, just so you know. The one thing I will just say, the 12,575 is a placeholder. That increase in the MMA risk pool insurance, I don't have a. That would be 1014,700, 251. That's a placeholder. We just finished the renewal. We had to put a number in there. I asked Zach to go a little heavy on the increase because I am concerned about the agreed upon replacement value for the new fire truck. That's an additional expense this year. And the cost of fixing things is going up and the legal expenses are going up associated with liability. And I did not want to raise our deductibles anymore because when you get hit with liability claim, depending on what it is anywhere from a $2,500 deductible to a $10,000 deductible. I didn't want to go much higher than that. I feel like we've pushed the deductibles as high as we can on the lower frequency events, like our police liability has a high deductible on because we don't see a lot of claims.
One thing that we did do is we did opt for the increased endorsement level for salt affected wells because $25,000, as we know, apparently doesn't cover a well anymore. So we have opted for the $50,000. I think it was $400 or so increase. It's based on the number of road miles that we have. The other thing that MMA is actively doing is they have a program that costs buildings. So they input your, your finishes, your construction, your age, all that type of thing. And that is updating our values or building values.
Spitting out higher values than the thumb was doing. So we are, the higher the value, the higher. So,
And it was the 2005 thumb.
so I'm hoping that my generous will mean that we'll either be there or be able to reduce a little bit.
So we are done going through the first section, but we're not necessarily done contemplating the first section. So I'd say if anybody has any thoughts about the section in general now or requests of staff, they can certainly welcome to communicate by email with Sophie about that. If something strikes you at midnight,
Go to bed.
Yeah.
See if it still strikes you at 8. Yeah.
But I'm cautious because this is a different way that we've approached the budget discussions than we have in years past. I think having an organic discussion is really helpful, but I don't want to leave people thinking that we can't get guidance from our staff or that there aren't other things that we can discuss along the way. Yeah.
To you open the door, how do we, is it in the audit, which I can go look at, but how does our debt service compare like historically or to other communities our size? And I mean, big line, obviously, and strikes, is it kind of, it's not always our practice to use debt on all the capital. So
It is not our practice, and if you give me just one minute to think things up, I can share. As far as our debt, the state of Maine limits the amount of debt that a community can carry. Debt is carried on the full faith and credit of the taxpayer. So it's based on what they think they could come in and liquidate the town for. So you don't really want to hit even their limit because it's ridiculously high. That's just, I guess that might be my commentary.
Yeah.
But when we look at the audited financial statements, you will see, I can't tell you necessarily how this compares to other communities our size because I'd have to go out and look.
Yeah.
But when you look at debt, you're looking at it as a percent of taxable valuation. And I think it's a total of 15% of that you're allowed of taxable valuation. In the audit, I know we're significantly under that, but I just want to pull you the right number. And if much yourself, I want to talk that.
And
You should also look at it as, I think a reasonable way to look at it would also be with regards to the size of our budget. Obviously,
Right.
as well. I mean, I understand
Yeah.
taxable valuation as far as what we're qualified.
Yeah.
Where we sit to think about it in terms of.
What is the, in terms of making suggestions on these things, either whether, I guess they're in these, what I call them the service level decisions or, we'll come back. Do we have a comprehensive discussion prior to a budget? I mean, before we get to the point where a budget gets packaged to be presented, it's not like we're gonna just go, here, Paul, here's the budget, what's the.
So, can I go back and answer the first question
Sure.
first?
Yeah.
So at the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
So the most we would have added to this is 250,000 and we would have retired somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000, so.
Good.
We had $17,870,000 in outstanding bonds and notes.
17 what?
17,870,000.
Yeah.
10 million of that is town. And it's almost 7.5 million of that is WPCF. We can have 15% for the town. No more than 7.5% to the enterprise fund, which would be WPCF. So compare that 17 million to 87 million that we could theoretically take out.
Alright.
Does that kind of give you a sense? In the time that I've been here, the town's general fund debt has vacillated usually in that 900. It's been over $1 million.
Oh, in terms of annual payments and stuff, yeah.
So to your second question, Dan, I think what I'm hoping we'll be able to do is forestall a situation we had last year, which was at the very last second, people came in with proposed budget cuts and we really didn't have enough time to deliberate about them. So maybe a good thing to start with at our next budget workshop is a review of takeaways from this budget
Oh,
workshop.
that'd be great, yeah.
And then we can go from there.
And to your question about how it gets presented, on the 12th, there's a public hearing.
Yeah.
And my job is to present your budget to the community.
Gotta be just like tonight, all right.
It's what, usually about 20 minutes or so of talking, and then Paul and Frederica usually always stand up with comments. Stu Dexter, if he is available, will come in and stand up and tell us that we need to spend less, and give us comparative mill rates, which is always fun. Usually it has been my experience, if we're not driving big service level cuts or big tax increases, that often is the sum total of our commentary. But when we have either of those two things happening, we've had the room, I wouldn't say packed, but 10, 15 people maybe.
It's massive.
So the goal for that final budget presentation is extremely high level.
Mhm.
And you tell me what your priorities are and I then make it happen.
Great. I think this is really well put together. It's very helpful.
Yeah, I like the process tonight. Thanks for facilitating, Jeff.
Yeah, well, materials are really clear, and we'll be getting that other payroll data relatively quickly.
All right, can I make a data request?
Sure.
Could we get a summarized expense lines for economic development expenses?
What do you mean summarized?
Yep.
So.
Because it does drive me a little bit crazy seeing a portion of mine is here and a portion of this is here, and there is no, we summarize that at the beginning. That's a category 859.
Yeah.
Whatever. I would like to see a page or whatever it takes, 2 pages that build up that explain that expense.
So when you look at public services,
Which section?
The blue and blue.
Got it. Okay, go in there.
you have, if you go beyond the trio data, there is something called economic development, and it only goes back last year and this year, but it is your full economic development
What page are you on?
budget, 22 through 25.
Uh-huh.
And the reason it's
Okay.
done that way is because economic development is paid out of TIFs, tax increment financing program development funds. So the only way, I mean, I can pull it and manually create the expense, but this is how we look at it as economic development as one in one place.
What do
The
you-
trio, what she's saying is that the trio reports are for the TIFs, and that's how everything is separated out in trio. So when when you want to report back to 2020, you have to look at the trio reports, and that's where you have it divided out between the downtown transit ordinance, TIF, and et cetera.
But this is all of the lines that do build.
Yeah,
up.
But in
I
our,
see that
yeah,
now
in our
because
spreadsheet.
I saw something that I thought would have been under there. What am I thinking? And it had its own, it only But it was 150 or something like that, but I thought it belonged under there, so maybe it doesn't belong under there. That's my. Okay, all right, well, that's that. I don't need
Is that
anything.
what you're looking for?
That is, I think, what I was looking for. Let me,
If you need more, let me
Sure.
know.
So just to be clear, unlike every other budget, the trio pages that precede the economic development budget do not match up with these lines exactly, because the trio budget is for each individual TIF account. So you've got Valley Dermatology TIF, you've got the downtown transit oriented TIF. It's been a real long night, apparently. You've got the Webster project, you've got EnvisionNet. So all of those are separated out, and there's percentages of expenses that are dispersed across those different TIFs. And that's how it's tracked in Trio. But how we think about it is the spreadsheet that we built. And that's the economic development spreadsheet.
so, and this is where, so this maybe is adding to the confusion. So, the assessor
Yep,
falls under there,
no.
doesn't? Okay, that is my.
The assessor, so we have,
Isn't
we have
that
an
part of that? But it's
Office
not.
of Community Development, which Mitch oversees. But he has the role of the Economic Development Director that leads the Economic Development Department, which is the spreadsheet, which is funded by the tax increment financing districts, which is the trio summary sheet. In the Office of Community Development, you also have that Mitch is responsible for overseeing. You have the assessor, the code officer, the planner. That's it,
And
so
economic development.
and economic development.
And so which of those don't show in this page 22 to 25?
So if you look at the entire public services, community development, and you start at the beginning, it takes you through each of the sub departments of community development.
Okay, so, right, so planning is under community development.
Yes, not economic development, community development.
So there's community development, which is the
The umbrella.
umbrella. And then the subs underneath community are planning, code, assessing, and economic development. Those are four separate things underneath community development.
So the 800 stuff does not include planning.
That's
stuff.
economic development. And debt service that is paid for out
Okay.
of the tax
All right,
financing
I need to
district.
study that then, perfect. That makes.
When you look at it and if you get confused, let me know.
Yeah, I already am, so.
You could just number the sections, Leo, it helps. Planning starts on page 2, and that's number 1. right?
Anything else
And then-
before we adjourn for the evening? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.